This module focuses on section 79.21E through L and will complete the items that need to be checked for New York State safety inspections on vehicles under 18,000 pounds. So we're going to talk about lighting and reflectors that must be on vehicles. There's a number of lights obviously on vehicles, but this is the list of lights that we check on vehicles 18,000 pounds and under. We check low beams, high beams, the tail lights, the stop lamps, directionals, the four-way flashers or the hazards, the backup lamps, and the plate lights. So if there's any other lamp on the car besides these lamps, we don't have to worry about them, except for vehicles that are over 80 inches wide, which we'll talk about in just a second. So again, the list of lights that we check on vehicles under 80 inches is the list on the previous slide. Any other lamps on the vehicle are okay as long as they are turned on and off with a switch that's separate from the headlamp switch. So you're not allowed to have additional lamps that come on and off with the headlamp, so you're not able to control them independently. Headlamps fail if they're not of an approved type, and you'll know they are if they have DOT markings on them, Department of Transportation approved lamp markings on them. If any lens is missing, broken, or has a crack that results in an opening, so just because it has a hairline crack in it doesn't mean it fails, but if there's an opening in that crack, that would result in a failure. If any filament does not light in the headlights, it fails New York State inspection. If the lights can be moved by with your hand, in other words, they're not secured, that would be a fail. And then if any foreign material is placed on headlamps that interferes with the lights, sort of tinting or covers, would fail New York State inspection. All other lamps fail if, again, similarly, the lamps are not securely mounted, if they don't produce a steady light, if they do not operate in the various positions. For instance, let's take the reverse lamps. If the reverse lamp should turn on when you put the vehicle in reverse and should turn off in all other gears. Same thing with brake lights. The brake lights should come on when you step on the brake pedal, and they should go off when you're not on the brake pedal. Again, if the lamps are not an approved type, in other words, they don't have the DOT markings on them, that would fail. If any lens is missing, or if the lens is missing a piece, or if it's cracked or improperly fit so that light is being emitted, that would fail. Any lens that has been repaired with an unapproved material, in other words, it's had a crack or an opening and someone put some tape on it or colored tape, that would fail New York State inspection. And if any vehicle is not equipped with the minimum lighting required for its model year, which changes slightly. We have to go all the way back to 1952 to see the minimum lighting. So if you go back to 1952 in older vehicles, all you're required to have is one red tail lamp or one red or amber stop lamp. Kind of unique, but anything 1953 and newer must have two front amber directional signals. If you're not familiar with what color amber is, it's that yellow orangish color. Again, you're supposed to have two red rear or amber directional signals, two red tail lamps, two red stop lamps. And if you're older than 1971, those two red stop lamps can be amber in color. Since 1969, all vehicles are required to have at least one white backup lamp. All vehicles are required to have the number of license plate lamps that were originally equipped on the vehicle. And all motor vehicles must have a directional lamp indicator. So usually that little triangular light that flashes in your instrument cluster is a directional lamp indicator. That must be working as well. 1966 and newer vehicles must have a four-way flasher, and it must operate independently of the ignition switch or turn signal. So obviously, if you're broken down on the side of the road and you leave the vehicle, you have your keys with you typically, and that four-way flasher has to work without the key in the ignition. 1987 and newer must have a center high-mounted stop lamp, and some technicians call it the third brake bulb or the chimsel. and it must be on the vertical center line of the vehicle, and it must have the number of bulbs that it was originally equipped with. And again, any additional lamp that's put on the vehicle, if it's not independent from the headlamp switch, that would fail New York State inspection. So let's talk about vehicles over 80 inches wide. These are your vehicles that are typically dualies. So if you take a 1-ton Ford or Dodge truck with the dual rear wheels, and they have those large quarter panel flares, those are over 80 inches, and that's why you see additional lamps. So on this truck you're looking at, on the roof, the roof of the cab, you see 5 lamps. The 3 lamps in the center are the cluster identification to show people that this vehicle is wide, and then the lamps on the outside show exactly how wide the vehicle is. So again, the lamps that show that this thing's over width is a 3 lamp cluster, and then the ones on the outside of the vehicle show just how wide the vehicle is. So the minimum lighting for vehicles over 80 inches wide, the front of the vehicle must have 3 amber cluster identification lamps, and then 1 on each side for a total of 5. The rear of the vehicle must have the 3 lamp cluster identification saying that it's over width, and those must be red. And then it has also the red clearance lamps that show how wide it is. On the side of the vehicle must have 1 amber light that shows on the side of the vehicle, and 1 red light that shows on the side of the vehicle. Obviously, the amber lights show from the front perspective of the vehicle, and the red lamps show from the rear of the vehicle. And then the last thing that we add to a vehicle that's over 80 inches wide is that it must have 1 amber and 1 red reflector. Alright, let's talk about windshields real quick. So all vehicles newer than 1935 must have a windshield. And when you read the regulations, the definition of a star on a windshield is a bruise or a stone chip that has multiple cracks extended from it. And so what fails New York State inspection is any crack in the windshield that's greater than 11 inches, but at least 1 spot of that crack has to be in the path of the wipers. So you could have a crack across the very top of your windshield, and if it's not jagged, it would pass New York State inspection as long as no part of that crack touches the wiper path. So again, any crack that's longer than 11 inches, any part of which is within the path of the wiper blades, would fail New York State inspection. And then the stone bruise that you're looking at on the left-hand side of the screen, that would fail New York State inspection if the diameter of the cracks is greater than 3 inches. So you're allowed little stone chips, just not anything that's greater than 3 inches anywhere on the windshield. Also, the windshield and other glass has to meet certain standards. So when you look at a windshield, you're gonna, if the windshield looks unique or doesn't look like it's normal, look for the approved safety standard number inside the the etching into the glass that shows what that glass is. And the vehicle fails if it's not one of these approved safety glasses with a rating of AS1, 10, or 14. And then you also check the windows on the side of the and rear of the driver for also the safety glass ratings of 1, 2, 3, 10, or 11. And in 20-some years, I've never found a piece of glass that didn't have these safety ratings, so it's not something to really stress over. In the last few years, we added some laws to New York State inspection, and involves window tint on windows of vehicles. So if you're looking at a vehicle and the glass is clear, you don't have to use the window tint meter. But if we're not sure, we have to use the window tint meter or a window tint meter that can read how much light is allowed to transmit through the glass. So what we're doing is we're checking passenger cars only for rear windows, And we're checking all vehicles for the windshield and also the front row windows. That the driver is right next to the driver, and right next to the passenger front passenger. So we check any part of the windshield below the top 6 inches. If there's a strip of window tint up there and the vehicle's older than 1991, that tint has to allow at least 35% of light transmittance. Same number, same percentage for the side windows next to the driver. And then any part of the rear window on any vehicle that's passenger vehicle without dual outside rear view mirrors must allow more than 35% light transmittance. Again, that's 1991 and older vehicles. 92 and older, the law gets a little bit more strict. So again, we're checking the windshield, the top 6 inches, and it must allow more than 70% light transmittance. Any side window would fail if the vehicle shows less than 70% light transmittance, and any part of the rear window, again without dual outside mirrors, if it allows less than 70% light transmittance, would fail. So the way it works is you throw that little tint meter on the glass, and it should read 70 or higher. If it doesn't, it fails. And again, we're checking this on the rear windows on passenger cars. So you have to sometimes check the Federal Motor Vehicle Safety Standard label, which is on typically the door jamb. For instance, this certification label is it's labeled down at the bottom of that tag. It says passenger car. You might be aware that some SUVs, the rear windows are kind of dark. Well, if you look at the FMVSS certification label, it's not going to show as a passenger car. It's going to show probably as an MPV, multi-purpose vehicle. And again, at that point, we're not checking the windows behind the driver. Let's talk about mirrors real quick. So 1967 and older vehicles must have at least one mirror, either an interior or left outside mirror. 1968 and newer must have that left outside mirror. 1970 and newer must have an adjustable interior mirror and a left outside mirror. And of course, that's unless the vehicle has 2 outside mirrors. So the way you can summarize this is the vehicle has to have 2 mirrors. One of them has to be a left outside. The other one could be an interior mirror or a right side mirror. With that said, if the vehicle has a right outside mirror, it has to be in good condition. As soon as that mirror is put on a vehicle, if there's something wrong with it, that would fail New York State inspection, and we'll talk about that in a second. Lastly, you might ask about a pickup truck that has a dump truck body on the back, where you can't see out that interior rear view mirror. That type of vehicle must have 2 outside mirrors. So we fail vehicles if there's not the required number of mirrors present. If any mirror cannot be adjusted to give a full view of the rear, and guys, just because it's, let's say, an electrically adjusted mirror, it's got power mirrors, if the power switch doesn't work to adjust it, that doesn't mean it fails. But if you can't physically move the glass to adjust it, that would fail. Any mirror that's not securely mounted fails, and any mirror fails if the glass is cracked, broken, or discolored. Again, there's a little note in the regulations that show if the glass is broken on the right mirror, right outside mirror, your options are replace the mirror or take it off. If you remove the mirror from the vehicle, it now passes as long as it has that interior mirror. So if you're looking at this, the question is, does it pass or fail? Obviously it fails because it's not securely mounted. If you look at this one, this is the right outside mirror. This obviously fails because the glass is cracked. You could make it pass by removing it as long as the interior mirror is there. This would fail because that glass is discolored. Some mirrors have some auto dimming things or properties that the glass changes color, and it should change back when there's no light flashing on it. So again, it's discolored. This fails. What about this one? This one, obviously, we're not talking about the color of the mirror, so this one would pass. We're not worried about the housing of it. We're worried about the glass of it. All right. Windshield wipers. The vehicle needs to have the number of wipers it was equipped with. And believe it or not, there are some vehicles out there that may have 3 front wiper blades, so we're checking them all. We do not check rear wipers because not all vehicles have rear wipers, so to hold everybody to the same standard, we don't check rear wipers. We fail vehicles for their wiper function if the wiper doesn't work or if it does not operate freely or is improperly adjusted. If any wiper blade has dead, torn, or badly worn rubber or material other than rubber comes in contact with the windshield. And we fail them if the wiper controls are beyond the reach of the driver when they're sitting in the normal driving position. So again, wiper blades are usually a high failure item in New York State inspections. Basically lift the wiper blade off the glass and just grab a little hold of the rubber where it touches the windshield and just make sure it's not torn. The horn. All vehicles must be equipped with at least one horn which can produce a sound sufficiently loud to serve as a danger warning. And believe it or not, a bulb or hand-operated horn like you would find in a circus that a clown would squeeze is acceptable if it is original equipment. We fail vehicles if the horn is not securely fastened to the vehicle. You may wonder why. Some horns, they're grounded through the bracket that holds the horn to the chassis of the vehicle, and if they're loosely mounted, that horn shaking around will interrupt with the sound of the horn. So it has to be securely fastened. It's difficult to check that sometimes with horns being placed behind grills and bumper covers, but we have to ensure that the horn is securely fastened. And if the horn button does not work properly or is not within the easy reach of the driver, that vehicle would fail. Let's talk about seat belts. 1965 and newer vehicles need at least 2 front seat belts. 67 and newer vehicles need seat belts for each rear passenger seat, and 1969 vehicles and newer need a seat belt for each passenger position. So you may work on or inspect an older vehicle. You have to be aware of the year and what is the number of belts that's required for the vehicle. How do we check seat belts? It's a functional test. First, we find the belt for each seat. We buckle the belt. We pull on it to make sure it's not going to release on its own. And if it does not, we then press the release button and make sure that the belt releases. And you got to make sure you do this at every seat position on any vehicle 1969 and newer. So these are some scenarios where a vehicle would fail. If any seatbelt cannot be buckled, if the seatbelt pulled out of its anchor. In other words, let's say a floor pan is so rotted that the anchor, the belt where it's anchored to the floor, you could pull it right out of the floor. If any seatbelt unbuckles when it's tugged on, any seatbelt that cannot be unbuckled. If a vehicle, typically from the early 90s or maybe even late 80s, has an automatic adjuster and it does not recoil, that fails. And any motorized seatbelt does not activate when the front door is open or closed, that would also fail. Let me go back to that automatic adjuster real quick. All vehicles have automatic adjusters. So this is what allows the seatbelt to spin itself back into its housing when you take it off. There are some vehicles where the seatbelt will get stuck out. It will not stay up against your body. So if that's the case, that would fail. Sometimes you have to help them a little bit when they get a little bit greasy or worn out. The grime on the belt doesn't allow them to go back in as much or as readily as they are when they're new. But again, you're the certified inspector. You have to make the judgment on whether or not the automatic adjuster is recoiling or not. Airbag lamps. Believe it or not, airbag lamps do not fail inspection when they're on. But we have to alert the customer that they're on. So when you input information into the CVIS, it will alert the customer. It'll ask you, is the airbag readiness light on or off? If it's on, it just leaves a little note on the inspection receipt. But we do not fail for an airbag issue. Last thing we're going to talk about is fuel leaks. We have to check the system for fuel leaks. Most of the vehicles that we work on are diesel or gas engine vehicles. We have to check the entire fuel system, and we fail the vehicle if any liquid is found dripping or pooling. However, if you're working on a different type of vehicle or a different type of fuel vehicle, an alternative fuel like compressed natural gas or propane, you fail the vehicle if there's a leak that is detected by either you hearing it or smelling it.